This video is a follow-on from the previous video dealing with the recent bank failures in America. Let's turn our attentions now to Europe, more specifically Credit Suisse and UBS in Switzerland. I'll detail some facts and then give some commentary afterwards. As you all probably know by now, Credit Suisse got bought up by UBS. Credit Suisse was Switzerland's second biggest bank, second only to UBS. Credit Suisse had been in big trouble for a while. As an indicator, it lost 97% of its share price since its peak in 2007. In 2022, they recorded a loss of $7.9 billion. The run on the bank started back in October 2022. Fast forward to recently, Credit Suisse was on the brink of bankruptcy. Credit Suisse was a globally, systemically important bank. Moreover, Credit Suisse was supposedly valued at around $530 billion. Compare this to the GDP of Switzerland, which is around $800 billion. So obviously, Swiss authorities had to act. The Swiss president said that, open quotes, an uncontrolled collapse of Credit Suisse would lead to incalculable consequences for the country and the international financial system, close quotes. And that's true. The ramifications would have been massive. They couldn't allow Credit Suisse to fail. Their options, however, were limited. Allow it to go bankrupt, nationalise it, or organise a buyout. They went for the third option, forcing UBS to buy it. So Credit Suisse got bought out by its rival UBS. It could be described as a corporate takeover. They bought it for $3.2 billion. Bear in mind that the Credit Suisse had a market cap valuation of $8 billion. So they bought it at a 60% discount. It's reminiscent of JP Morgan buying Bear Stearns for a bargain price at the start of the 2007-2008 financial crisis. But given the losses of 2022, the purchase perhaps doesn't seem like quite such a good idea. They got some sweeteners though. $173 billion was pledged to guard against further risks. And they got a loss guarantee for dodgy derivatives of up to $9 billion. So essentially a nice little compensation package. And UBS gets access to funds made available by the Swiss National Bank. There's a liquidity facility of over $100 billion, which acts as a backstop, which is nice for them, isn't it? However, as Gregory Mannarino of Trader Choice on YouTube says, the assets for Credit Suisse are in the region of $530 billion. He described it as the greatest sale of all time. So viewed in this way, $3.2 billion could be seen as a knockdown price. Shareholders haven't done well. They took a hit. Neither the shareholders of Credit Suisse or UBS got a chance to vote on the takeover. It was rushed through. Such was the urgency. But the bondholders fared worse. They lost in the region of $17 billion. There are several things I want to say about this. To some extent, I feel sorry for the shareholders and bondholders. We shouldn't take any pleasure in the misfortunes of our fellow humans, but it just shows that you really have to be extremely careful about where you put your money these days. While I do feel sorry for them, I can't help but thinking that these people or institutions were very foolish. I personally would never invest in any institution right now. The financial system is way too precarious at present. My strategy for the foreseeable future is to have next to no money in any bank and use any spare fiat to buy precious metals. That's it. As far as I'm concerned, there are no other options. This is not financial advice, by the way. You're entitled to do as you please. I'm just telling you what I do. Moving on. At the risk of stating the obvious, if Credit Suisse didn't get bought up by UBS, it would be bankrupt by now. So essentially, it went bust. Credit Suisse was a globally systemically important bank, a GSIB. There are only 30 banks recognised as globally systemically important banks in the world, and now one of them, namely Credit Suisse, is no longer in existence. 30 green bottles sitting on the wall, and if one green bottle should accidentally fall, there'll be 29 green bottles sitting on the wall. Whatever anyone says, it's basically another banking sector bailout. The Swiss authorities forced UBS to buy it because they couldn't allow it to go bust, and also because they couldn't step in themselves. It would look bad given what happened in the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008 and their promises about bailouts. A private sector solution looked better. Perceptions matter more than you might think. Oh yes, and I should say that the week before, the Swiss authorities gave a $54 billion liquidity facility to Credit Suisse, but that obviously wasn't enough to stave off disaster. UBS also gets access to funds made available by the Swiss National Bank, the Central Bank of Switzerland, which is a backstop. The Swiss banking sector has been up until recently regarded as the safest and most stable in the world. So, if the second biggest bank in Switzerland got into trouble, then it does not bode well for Switzerland or elsewhere. But then maybe I'm just giving voice to the catastrophic side of my personality, and you can call me crazy and ignore my warnings if you want. The Fed had been funneling funds to the Swiss National Bank prior to the failure of Credit Suisse, providing them with short-term liquidity. So essentially, the Fed had been bailing out the Swiss banking system behind the scenes and probably still is. As a side note, I wonder how many Americans knew about this and wonder what their reaction would be if they knew. Ordinarily, such a merger or acquisition probably wouldn't be allowed by UBS because UBS and Credit Suisse were the two biggest banks in Switzerland. That should tell you something. These are not normal market conditions. We're living in extraordinary times, and extraordinary things are happening and will continue to happen. A pattern is emerging. Bondholders are getting screwed, and you could say who cares, but this will weaken bond markets globally and cause further problems down the road. But then it's all probably part of the plan to blow up the bond market. The bond market in Britain went haywire in October last year. It's only a matter of time before all bond markets blow up. There should be alarm bells ringing for you for all of these points. But anyway, staying in Europe, the German Chancellor did something similar to Biden, coming out and telling Germans not to worry about their savings. Meanwhile, Deutsche Bank is in serious trouble. Deutsche Bank is another globally systemically important bank. 29 green bottles sitting on a wall. Some might say, what else can he say? If he said there was a severe crisis, people would panic. And I would say that if you're not concerned now, then you might want to start to wonder what is going on. Signs are always there to be read. As with the Boxing Day tsunami of 2004, people did not read the signs properly. Prior to the tsunami hitting, the water receded greatly. This was a huge sign, but people did not understand what it meant. They just looked on and did nothing. Some of them died as a result of their lack of understanding and their inaction. Signs are there to be read in the financial sector, in the markets, in the wider economy now. The way I see it, all sorts of indicators are flashing red. I see it as my duty as a human being to issue an alert in order to help others. Be warned, I think a financial tsunami is coming our way. With the real tsunami of 2004, when the water rushed inland, some people sought safety on the higher ground. The higher ground with regard to the financial tsunami is precious metals. They have been seen as a safe haven throughout the ages. I refer you to the videos I did on precious metals, money, gold, silver, fiat currencies, hyperinflation, etc. I split this topic into a number of videos, so there may be one or two to follow. Wise up and rise up.